never rests.
Counting careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
Hey guys, welcome into the Georgia Show, your Thursday edition. Jake Roos and Jeremy Johnson here with you today. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe to the DawgsHQ YouTube page while you're over here checking things out. Jeremy, listen, let's just dive right into this thing, man. Big day coming up for Georgia in terms of a decision. Matt Zollers, the number 49 player by the On3 industry ranking, but number 17 by the On300 ranking. You've had a chance to catch up with Matt a few times throughout this recruitment. Just your takeaways on him as a kid, getting to know him, talk to him, kind of feel him out through this process.
Yeah, he seems like a really humble, very smart young man. Definitely has you can definitely tell he's got that northern feel about him. He's a guy that's grown up in Pennsylvania, so he's still kind of new to SEC football, so he hasn't really had a chance to dive all the way into that yet. But just from talking to him, he's definitely seems to have a lot of respect for what goes on in football down here in the South. But he's definitely big on a lot of things about Georgia's culture. Obviously, Penn State is another school that's close to home for him. His brother plays at Pitt, I believe, and then Missouri is obviously another program that's in it for him. So, very good person. Definitely see the attraction with the culture fit if he was to end up at Georgia. So.
Yeah. Zoller is one of those guys, man. You go turn the tape on. I remember when he kind of first came on my radar, and I went and watched the tape, and I said, good Lord, what is going on here? The way you said it the other day, I thought was perfect. You said he plays like the ground is on fire around him.
Yeah.
And it does. I mean, he moves a lot. He moves a lot back there. But, it was interesting for me last night. I was going back through and looking over some film for him and looking over his max preps. He's a guy who, if you look at it, consistently has gotten better from freshman year to junior year. There's been no regression. The numbers continue to climb. The accuracy is getting better. The rushing is improving. Just kind of a total package development from him. So that leads me into, I guess, what is the next question, which is, what does it mean if Georgia lands Matt Zollers, in your opinion?
It means they got a really good quarterback of the future. I mean, this guy, like you were saying, man, this guy's his ability is next level. He's a big time talent. I mean, and you start to compare him to some of these other guys in this class. You say, oh my gosh, like some of this arm talent, some of the stuff he does, getting out of the pocket, being able to extend plays, being able to tuck the football out and run secondaries. That's an underrated trait to have now. Like it's one thing to be able to move, to throw, but then when you can move and then tuck it and hurt a defense, that changes your entire playbook. And I think that's what this guy can bring. I don't know if he'll necessarily be I don't think he'll be Lamar Jackson at the next level. I don't think he'll be Caleb Williams at the next level, but I think there's a good happy medium somewhere in there that, hey, this guy's athletic enough to do all of the things you want to do in modern day football. So that's what you're getting. You're getting a guy that fits the modern mold of college football. I mean, he can do the different arm slots. He can throw it deep. He can throw it intermediate. He can run. He's not even he's really good with guys in his face too. I mean, I watch his tape and he's okay getting hit and delivering that football. So, I mean, you're getting a complete package, and the guy is a great basketball player as well. So he's a really good athlete. So I think that's kind of those are the things that really stand out about him.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And I think that one of the things about Zollers that intrigues me the most is that wonder about not necessarily hasn't developed, but how much further can this thing go, right? I think that you and I have had that discussion a few times talking about, obviously I think the other name everybody talks about in this class is Juju Lewis, and for good reason. We'll get to that in a moment. But, when you look at those two guys, I think that it's a case where, Juju is probably the more college-ready prospect right now. He's probably the guy who could help you tomorrow. Matt Zollers is a guy that I don't know that we know how good he can be just yet.
Yeah. I hate to do this comparison. I mean, I don't like comparisons when it comes to quarterbacks, but it's almost like when the Houston Texans drafted Deshaun Watson, and they were like, well, this is the guy that was great in college and we know what he's going to be. And he was that, for the first part of his career. And then people criticize Kansas City for drafting Patrick Mahomes. He wasn't great his first year. He didn't play a whole lot. I mean, that's the kind of comparison I think we're looking at here. I mean, I think I wrote on the board the other day is Julian Lewis is smooth jazz, and he's good all the time, and you know exactly what it is you're getting. With Matt Zollers, you don't know exactly what you're getting yet, but the intrigue of what it could be is almost like going to a rock concert, and you don't know exactly who it is you're going to see, but you could show up and it'd be the best time of your life. So that's kind of the comparison between the two for me.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think, like you said, from a pure polish standpoint, Lewis is the dude. But from an intangibles standpoint, things you can't teach. We're talking about a guy here in Zollers, 6'3.5" frame. The way that he runs in that frame too, just not something you see a lot. Like you said, willingly kind of takes contact, and especially, gosh, in this era where you got guys who are looking out for me, first and foremost. I gotta take care of me. That's a more old school mentality, I think, with the way he plays. It's an interesting one here to the end, because the three names that we're kind of hearing consistently going into the final hours of this: Georgia, Missouri, Penn State. Penn State long been in this thing, and I think probably going to feel pretty chapped if they don't end up being the spot, because they have poured a lot of resources into Matt Zollers. They have really recruited him hard and kind of discovered him to some degree.
Yeah.
But Missouri and Georgia, that SEC hold seems to really do something for him, man. And so, I guess, do you have a feel on this thing, man? I mean, I'm not asking anybody to make a prediction, because the fact of the matter is the kid has said he's going to wait until pretty much right before this thing to let coaches know. So it's not like college staffs even know this. It's, we would be venturing a total gut guess if we were to do such a thing. But I'm just curious, does one situation make more sense to you, maybe?
I mean, I think Georgia probably makes the most sense. I mean, obviously you can come in and sit, or you can come in and compete for the job next year. I mean, there's no pressure on him. I mean, if he goes to Georgia, there's no pressure to come and be the savior. You got Ryan Puglisi that you just signed in 2024, who was a guy that we talked about similarly this time last year. So, I think Georgia probably makes the most sense. You're going to have guys that can protect you. You're going to have receivers. You're going to have a running game. You're going to have a great defense. So that, I mean, as a quarterback that wants to go to college and, potentially sit and develop and learn and have opportunity to win championships, that's the option that makes the most sense. Penn State also makes a lot of sense, because with them, you got Drew Aller in place, and, that's close to home, and that's the program that has poured into him and, been right there the entire time for him. I mean, they've really been like the kind of program that discovered him, like you said. I mean, I hadn't heard of him until every time I heard of him, it was because of Penn State, So, that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, and the case can be made for Missouri, especially if he values playing early. I mean, they have Brady Cook in place. They got Jake Garcia, guy from the state of Georgia not from the state of Georgia. He played in the state of Georgia,
right. That's a whole other podcast.
That could be a whole other episode. But he's there. You got Sam Horn, who is from the state of Georgia, that is also there. So there's a couple guys he would have to battle there, but like that, I mean, there's opportunity there to play as well. So I don't know. I can see why this would be a very hard decision for him, because there is a lot of good options. But to me, Georgia makes a lot of sense. Just from any quarterback in the country, to be honest. I mean, just with the resources that are in place.
Sure. And it's interesting. You mentioned Ryan Puglisi in that comparison last year. And then I go turn on the tape of Jared Curtis in that 26th class, and I see some very similar things there as well. It's very kind of clear to me that Mike Bobo has come in with an idea of what this Georgia quarterback room is going to look like. And it reminds me a little bit more of, kind of the older school, the bigger bodied guys with the big rocket arms, that fit well within that pro style. Now, like I said, I'm not saying any of these guys can't move, but they're a little bit more of that, like I said, kind of the old school, the big body guy. Zollers certainly fits that, but I think he brings the different element between the three of those guys when it comes to his wheels. I think he moves a little bit easier than the three of them.
Mike Bobo definitely appears to have a type at quarterback for sure.
I agree. Well, we'll find out about Matt Zollers at 3 p.m. I'm in agreement with you, Jeremy. I do feel good about where Georgia is in this thing going into it. But look, I felt good about where KJ Bolden was going to go the first time he made his commitment. I mean, it is what it is in this era. And, so all we can do is sit back and watch along with you guys. But we'll definitely have you covered on all the angles of it over at DawgsHQ, including what happens if they miss, Jeremy? So let's assume that Matt Zollers ends up staying in the SEC, but he's playing with the Tigers of Mizzou, or maybe he sticks a little closer to home, goes with the Nittany Lions. Where does this kind of put things for Georgia in terms of moving forward?
Well, it puts them in a situation where they either go, you go evaluate the position some more, find another guy to pursue, or you go all in with Juju Lewis. I mean, Ryan Montgomery, I'm sure, will be a part of that equation as well. If they do miss on Zollers, I mean, he's the guy that they've been involved with the entire time. I mean, he's been on campus 5-6 times, planning to take an official visit in the middle of the summer. And Julian Lewis is the same way. He's got his official set for the 31st. So I feel like those are the two guys that now move even more into the spotlight. Not to say that they weren't in the spotlight before. I feel like Julian Lewis is right there with Matt Zollers. So I think that's what you do. I mean, that's kind of where it's going to be, and we'll see what happens with that. If that is the case, just because I know they've been recruiting both of those guys for a long time, so the relationship's already strong. So
yeah, I think that for Georgia, I agree completely with you in terms of where they're talking, where you move from here. Lewis and Montgomery become those guys for you. I think where this hurts Georgia more than just quarterback is the ability to start fleshing out your offensive class personally. When you start thinking about the plethora of wide receivers that they have, not only just in state, but, kind of interested throughout the country, you're talking about, 8-10 guys that you could put on a board today and say, yeah, these are guys that feel like very real options for Georgia. I think a guy like Zollers going ahead and getting something like this done really helps you start getting momentum toward that end. At least in my opinion, I think that you can kind of, play off of this. Guys are going to feel a little better knowing who their guy is coming in with the signal caller. I think that that's where it, works in Georgia's favor if they do land him. I think that it's tougher to do that, and it's tougher to wait around on a guy like Lewis, who is bouncing kind of hard, it feels like, between a few options, right? Even though USC really feels like the spot, and he said, this last visit solidified things for him. You hear Alabama still mentioned with Julian Lewis. You hear Auburn mentioned a little bit with Julian Lewis. You're hearing Georgia mentioned with him. So there's still kind of, despite the commitment, there's still a seeming openness there. With Zollers, we'll see. I definitely wouldn't ever write anything like that off, but he doesn't seem like a guy who's in love with the process very much, and seems like he wants to get it done. And like I said, I think that would help Georgia build for the future personally. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, and a lot of these guys are really comfortable with it's going to be interesting if Zollers does commit. I mean, there will be a period of time where these guys have to get comfortable with who he is, because he doesn't play on the 7-on-7 circuit. He hasn't been on the camp circuit, and he hasn't been a guy that we've talked about for 3 years. It's that I think he got his first Power 5 offer in October. So a lot of these elite receivers, he's an unknown guy. So I'm sure there will be some conversation that, hey, try to get to know who this is, at some point, if this does happen today. And with Julian Lewis, I mean, a lot of these guys already know him. Ryan Montgomery's the same. He's been on the same for some years. So that's a really good point that I hadn't considered, is that it'll impact the skill guys for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the, and I mean, look, Georgia, this is going to play right into our next thing here, actually, but Georgia's still looking for its first commitment on the offensive line, and a big decision set for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Mason Short, in-state offensive lineman, set to announce his pledge. It'll be his second time doing so. Alabama previously held it. He kind of reopened things after Nick Saban decided to move on from the Crimson Tide. But out of the Augusta area, down there in Evans, Georgia, Mason's a guy that I think both you and I have covered for a couple of years now. He was hard to miss even when he was a freshman, right? I mean, he's always been a big guy. But I know you had a chance to go down and talk with him recently, Jeremy. And, I'm just curious, outside looking in on this thing, your feel on this and your feel on Mason Short as a player.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like it's been a 2-team race for a while. Clemson, obviously one of those programs, Georgia, the other. Ohio State is another program that he mentioned quite a bit. And, I think it's really those 2 teams that are the teams to beat. And it's going to be interesting because he fits both programs. One thing I really was impressed about with getting to meet him is just how much he fits both of the cultures. I've had the chance to cover Clemson in the past, so I know a lot of the things that they look for in players, and he checks a lot of those boxes for them, and I'm sure they check them for him. So Georgia's another the other program, and there's a lot of it's funny because a lot of the things that Clemson covets, Georgia now covets. So it's like it's interesting seeing how those 2 programs mirror each other. And we're going to get to see it play out on the field in week 1. So I think that's kind of the 2 we'll see for him right now. I feel like Georgia's in a good spot moving into the decision tomorrow, though.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Like you said, those have been the 2 consistent names, and from the culture standpoint, both of them just make so much sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's interesting because there was a bit of a lull, I felt like, between Georgia and Clemson in terms of recruiting, facing off each other. It feels like this year we're starting to hear that pick up a lot more. You're hearing it with David Sanders, right? You're hearing it with Mason Short. Who's responsible for both of those guys? Wow, a guy who knows Georgia pretty well in Matt Luke. This is an opportunity for Georgia to get this offensive line class started off. Short could be their first guy if he goes with the Dogs. I'm just curious, some of the other names that you're watching out there. Cortez Smith, I think, continues to be a guy to watch. Sanders, we mentioned him earlier. Josh Petty is in that list. Who am I not thinking of, man?
Michael Fasusi out of Texas. That's a guy that kind of I'd written off that he's Texas or one of those programs out that way, but Georgia really made an impression on him this week, and I feel like the momentum is kind of with Georgia at this point. He really came off that visit and really spoke highly of Georgia, and it was a big eye-opening experience for him. So I expect him to be more of a factor now. Obviously David Sanders is a big deal, and Josh Petty's still involved. And Juan Gaston out of Westlake, Atlanta, is still going to be a big target. And he was at Oregon this week, so I feel like those 2 are the guys that continuously kind of are starting to. Well, Juan's kind of been there, but Michael Fasusi is one that I'm intrigued to see what kind of happens over the next month or so.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Not surprising, but just one of those chess, not checkers moves to pair him with Michael Weenie and to get those 2 guys together. You've got Joseph Jonah-Janye, you've got Dylan Bells from out in Texas, you got Justin Williams. Obviously, they got a nice little Lone Star contingent here in Athens, and I bet that probably gave him a factor of comfortability with Georgia.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap things up here on this edition of the Georgia Show on Thursday morning. Make sure to get over to DawgsHQ. We will have you covered on all things Matt Zollers' commitment, regardless of where it goes, Georgia or otherwise. And make sure to be tuned in for that one. We'll also have you covered on all things Mason Short tomorrow morning. Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, they're all fighting for him. Be interesting to see how these go. But for this episode of the Georgia Show, I'm Jake Roos. He's Jeremy Johnson. The police are here to get me. We got to go.